The city did not sleep during that summer of 1942. Even before the first German bombs fell, Stalingrad already lived in tension. Factory sirens echoed day and night. Trains screamed through the industrial districts along the Volga River, and civilians moved with the uneasy awareness that something enormous was approaching. This video tells the story of 20 interesting facts about the Battle of Stalingrad, a battle where an entire city became a weapon, where soldiers fought room by room and floor by floor, where survival depended on seconds, and where the course of World War II was permanently altered. What you are about to witness is not just a military confrontation, but a descent into one of the darkest chapters in human history, told through real accounts of those who were there. In 1942, Adolf Hitler's primary objective was not Stalingrad itself. His obsession was oil. The German war machine was bleeding fuel, and the oil fields of the Caucasus were seen as the key to sustaining the Reich's momentum. Stalingrad lay along the Volga River, the most vital supply artery of the Soviet Union, and protected the northern flank of the German advance south. Capturing the city would sever Soviet logistics and secure the drive toward the oil fields. But as the campaign progressed, the symbolic weight of the city bearing Stalin's name transformed it into something far more than a strategic objective. It became a matter of pride, ideology, and obsession for both leaders. Stalingrad was never meant to be a fortress. It was an industrial city built to produce steel, tractors, weapons, and tanks, not to withstand a prolonged siege. Defensive preparations were rushed and incomplete. Trenches were shallow, barricades were improvised, and many civilians were still working in factories when the first waves of German aircraft appeared in the sky. On August 23, 1942, the Luftwaffe unleashed one of the most devastating bombing campaigns of the war. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ash in hours. Wooden houses burned uncontrollably, creating firestorms that consumed everything in their path. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed within days. Survivors later recalled streets filled with bodies, smoke so thick it blocked out the sun, and a city that seemed to be collapsing into itself. Ironically, the destruction of Stalingrad worked against the German army. The ruins eliminated the advantages of speed, armor, and air superiority that had defined earlier German victories. Rubble created natural fortifications. Collapsed buildings formed hidden firing positions. Tanks struggled to maneuver through shattered streets. The city turned into a labyrinth of death, where every pile of debris could conceal an enemy soldier. Unlike other cities threatened by German advances, Stalingrad was never fully evacuated. Stalin initially refused a mass evacuation, believing that a populated city would be defended more fiercely. As a result, tens of thousands of civilians remained trapped inside the battle zone. Families hid in basements and cellars, sharing cramped spaces with soldiers and the wounded. Many civilians continued to work under fire, carrying ammunition, digging trenches, and assisting medics. For them, survival meant silence, darkness, and the ability to endure constant terror. The Volga River became the city's only lifeline. It was the route through which reinforcements, ammunition, and food reached the defenders. Crossing it was an act of near suicide. German artillery and aircraft targeted the river relentlessly. Ferries were destroyed mid-crossing. Soldiers drowned under the weight of their gear. Burning oil floated on the water's surface. Yet every night, new troops crossed anyway, knowing that many would never return. Soviet veterans later described the Volga as a river that carried hope in one direction and death in the other. Soviet soldiers fought under the shadow of Order Number 227, Stalin's infamous command declaring that there would be not one step back. Unauthorized retreat was punishable by death. Blocking detachments were positioned behind the lines to prevent mass withdrawal. While the reality was more complex than propaganda suggested, the psychological effect was undeniable. Many soldiers understood that survival depended not on escape, but on holding their positions, no matter the cost. German troops entered Stalingrad expecting a rapid victory. They had crushed cities across Europe with speed and coordination, and many believed Stalingrad would fall within days. Instead, they encountered a form of warfare they had never truly faced. Combat took place at distances so close that artillery and air power became dangerous to use. Soldiers advanced into buildings only to be attacked from basements, attics, and stairwells. The Germans began calling it Rattenkrieg, the War of Rats, a fight where men lived and died like animals in the rubble. Inside the city, factories continued to operate even as battles raged within their walls. Workers assembled rifles and tanks while shells exploded nearby and bullets shattered windows. In some cases, newly built T-34 tanks rolled directly from factory floors into combat, sometimes crewed by men who had assembled them hours earlier. The line between civilian and soldier disappeared completely. Snipers emerged as one of the most feared weapons of the battle. Soviet marksmen used the ruins with deadly precision, targeting officers, machine gunners, and anyone who exposed themselves too long. Figures like Vasily Zaitsev became legends not only for their kill counts, but for the psychological terror they inflicted. German soldiers learned to fear windows, doorways, and shadows, knowing death could come from anywhere. As the weeks passed, German supply lines became dangerously outstretched. Fuel shortages worsened, ammunition became scarce, food deliveries were irregular. Even before winter arrived, German units were fighting at a fraction of their strength. Rain turned roads into rivers of mud, slowing convoys and isolating frontline troops. And when temperatures began to drop, weapons jammed, engines failed, and frostbite claimed lives as effectively as enemy fire. By October 1942, casualties had reached staggering levels. Entire divisions ceased to exist. Soviet reinforcements often survived only hours after crossing the Volga. A grim phrase circulated among defenders: there was no land beyond the Volga. To retreat meant death. To advance meant death. To stay meant a chance, however small, to survive another day. Stalingrad was no longer just a city. It was a symbol, a test of will, and a trap slowly closing around hundreds of thousands of men. Every ruined building became a battlefield. Every hour held was a victory. And as the fighting intensified, something unseen was taking shape beyond the smoke and rubble. A plan that would transform this brutal urban struggle into one of the greatest turning points of the war. This was only the beginning. The battle did not slow down. It grew more savage with every passing day. By the time autumn tightened its grip on Stalingrad, the city had become a world of shadows, smoke, and constant death. Soldiers on both sides no longer measured time in days or weeks, but in minutes survived. Sleep became a rare luxury. Men fought for days without rest, their nerves stretched to the breaking point, moving through ruins where the dead were left where they fell, because stopping to bury them meant dying alongside them. German units pushed deeper into the city, street by street, building by building. Maps became useless almost immediately. A location marked as secure in the morning could be lost by nightfall. A single apartment block might change hands 10 times in one day. Soviet defenders learned to exploit every inch of cover. Walls were knocked through to allow movement between rooms without exposing soldiers to fire. Rubble was shaped into firing positions. Stairwells were trapped with grenades. Every corner was turned into a potential ambush. Close combat defined life in Stalingrad. Rifles were often too long and cumbersome inside buildings. Soldiers relied on submachine guns, pistols, knives, entrenching tools, and grenades. There were documented cases of fights breaking out in complete darkness, where men grappled blindly, unable to tell friend from foe, until it was too late. Survivors later recalled the sound of breathing in the dark, the scrape of boots on concrete, and the sudden violence that erupted without warning. The psychological toll was immense. Constant shelling shattered nerves. Soldiers began to hallucinate from exhaustion. Many described a numbness that replaced fear, a state where survival became automatic. Letters from the front spoke of men who no longer reacted to explosions, who stepped over bodies without emotion, who felt detached from their own existence. In this environment, morale was fragile, yet both sides continued to fight with relentless determination. Food was scarce, water was often contaminated. Soviet troops sometimes melted snow or drank from shell craters mixed with blood and debris. German soldiers relied on dwindling rations that arrived late, if at all. Hunger weakened bodies already pushed to their limits. Medical care was rudimentary. Field hospitals were overcrowded, understaffed, and frequently targeted by artillery. Wounded soldiers often waited days for treatment, many dying from infections or exposure rather than their initial injuries. One of the most iconic locations of the battle was the massive grain elevator near the southern edge of the city. When Soviet troops took position inside it, German forces launched repeated assaults to dislodge them. The building was visible from kilometers away, making it a constant target for artillery and air attacks. Inside, Soviet defenders fought while surrounded by burning grain that filled the air with choking smoke. Ammunition ran low, and water was almost non-existent, yet they held out for days, inflicting heavy casualties and becoming a symbol of Soviet resistance. Another focal point was the massive industrial complex of the Red October, barricade, and tractor factory. These factories were not just workplaces, but fortresses. Their thick concrete walls and steel structures provided natural defenses. Combat inside them was nightmarish. Molten metal spilled from damaged equipment. Machinery blocked movement and created deadly choke points. The roar of battle mixed with the echo of empty production halls, turning the factories into hellish arenas where men fought at arm's length. German commanders grew increasingly frustrated. Superior training and equipment seemed meaningless in the ruins. Artillery strikes often destroyed positions, only for Soviet soldiers to reappear from cellars and tunnels moments later. The Soviet tactic of staying dangerously close to German lines limited the effectiveness of air support. Bombing runs risked hitting their own troops. What had once been Germany's greatest strength became a liability. Snipers continued to dominate the battlefield. Soviet sniper schools were established on the eastern bank of the Volga, training soldiers specifically for urban warfare. These marksmen targeted officers, messengers, and machine gun crews, disrupting command and control. German troops responded by deploying their own snipers, leading to deadly duels that could last days. These encounters were not just about killing, but about patience, endurance, and psychological warfare. As the fighting intensified, Soviet casualties were staggering. Entire units were wiped out within hours of entering the city. Reinforcements crossed the Volga knowing their life expectancy could be measured in minutes. Yet the flow of men never stopped. Commanders fed troops into the ruins continuously, believing that holding the Germans in Stalingrad was essential, regardless of the cost. Every German soldier pinned down in the city was one less advancing towards the Caucasus. German losses mounted as well. Veterans later described Stalingrad as the place where the army began to bleed beyond recovery. Elite units were reduced to shadows of their former strength. Officers died at alarming rates, forcing inexperienced replacements to take command. The relentless close combat erased the advantage of experience and doctrine. Survival depended on instinct and luck. By November 1942, the city was barely recognizable. It was a landscape of broken walls, twisted steel, and frozen corpses. Smoke hung permanently in the air. The Volga continued to deliver men and supplies under fire, while German forces remained locked in a battle they could neither win nor abandon. What they did not yet realize was that while they were fighting for ruins, the Soviet high command was preparing something far beyond the city itself. Behind the scenes, a massive counteroffensive was taking shape. Armies were being assembled in secrecy. Tanks, artillery, and fresh divisions were moving into position far from the ruins, hidden from German reconnaissance. Stalingrad was no longer just a battle of survival. It was becoming the center of a trap. And when that trap closed, the war would never be the same. By mid-November 1942, the battle for Stalingrad reached a silent turning point that few soldiers inside the ruins could sense. While German and Soviet troops continued killing each other over shattered buildings and frozen streets, the true fate of the battle was being decided far beyond the city. The German Sixth Army remained locked in brutal urban combat, unaware that it was slowly being surrounded by forces it could no longer stop. On November 19, 1942, the Soviet counteroffensive began. Operation Uranus was unleashed not against the strongest German positions inside Stalingrad, but against the weaker flanks guarding the city. These flanks were held largely by Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian troops, many of whom lacked adequate anti-tank weapons, winter clothing, and sufficient support. When the Red Army attacked, it did so with overwhelming force. Thousands of artillery guns opened fire simultaneously, shaking the frozen ground and tearing through defensive lines that collapsed within hours. Soviet tank formations poured through the gaps, advancing rapidly across the open steppe. German commanders were stunned by the speed and scale of the assault. Communications broke down almost immediately. Units were cut off before they understood what was happening. Within days, Soviet forces from the north and south linked up near the town of Kalach, encircling more than 250,000 Axis troops in and around Stalingrad. The trap had closed. Inside the pocket, confusion turned into dread. German soldiers who had been fighting for weeks in the ruins now realized they were surrounded. Supply routes were severed. Retreat was impossible. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, commander of the Sixth Army, requested permission to break out while it was still possible. Hitler refused. He ordered the army to hold its ground, promising that the Luftwaffe would supply the encircled forces by air until a relief force could arrive. This promise was a fatal illusion. The Luftwaffe lacked the aircraft, fuel, and weather conditions needed to supply an army of that size. Airfields inside the pocket were under constant attack. Planes were shot down or forced to turn back. Even at maximum effort, the airlift delivered only a fraction of the food, ammunition, and medical supplies required. Starvation soon followed. Soldiers slaughtered horses for meat. Bread rations shrank to almost nothing. Men grew so weak they struggled to carry their weapons. Winter descended with merciless force. Temperatures plunged far below freezing. Soldiers lacked proper clothing, gloves, and shelter. Frostbite claimed thousands of fingers, toes, and lives. Wounded men froze to death in unheated bunkers. Medical supplies were exhausted. Surgeons performed amputations without anesthesia. Infections spread unchecked. Diaries from inside the pocket described men lying side by side for warmth, knowing that some would not wake up. Soviet forces tightened the noose. Artillery pounded German positions day and night. Snipers hunted relentlessly. Every attempt to break out or resupply was crushed. German morale collapsed as hope faded. Some soldiers still believed in rescue, clinging to rumors of a relief army advancing from the west. Others understood the truth and descended into despair. Desertions increased, discipline eroded. The once proud Sixth Army was disintegrating. In December 1942, German forces launched Operation Winter Storm, an attempt to relieve the encircled army. Armored units advanced toward Stalingrad from the south, achieving initial success. For a brief moment, rescue seemed possible, but the relief force lacked the strength to break through Soviet defenses, and Paulus was again denied permission to attempt a breakout. The opportunity vanished. The encircled troops were left to their fate. Hitler promoted Paulus to Field Marshal in January 1943, a rank no German officer had ever surrendered with. The message was clear. Suicide was expected. Paulus refused. He knew further resistance was pointless. His army was starving, frozen, and shattered. Soviet forces launched their final offensive, splitting the pocket into smaller sections and crushing resistance piece by piece. Street fighting returned, but it was no longer a battle between equals. German soldiers were too weak to resist effectively. Ammunition was gone. Weapons were abandoned. Men surrendered in groups, their faces hollow, their bodies barely able to stand. Others fought on until they were killed, trapped by orders they could no longer obey. On January 31, 1943, Paulus surrendered the southern pocket. 2 days later, the northern pocket collapsed. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. Nearly an entire German army had been destroyed. Of the hundreds of thousands who entered the city, only a fraction would ever return home. The victory electrified the Soviet Union and shocked the world. For the first time, a complete German field army had been annihilated. The myth of German invincibility was shattered. Stalingrad became a symbol of resistance, sacrifice, and the turning of the tide. But the true cost of victory was written in blood and ruins. The city was uninhabitable. Corpses lay frozen where they fell. Mines and unexploded shells littered the streets. Survivors emerged from cellars to a world reduced to ash. Stalingrad had devoured armies, and in its aftermath, the war entered a new phase from which Nazi Germany would never fully recover. When the guns finally fell silent in February 1943, the silence itself felt unnatural. After months of constant explosions, screams, and gunfire, Stalingrad stood frozen in a haunting stillness. The battle was over, but its presence lingered everywhere. Smoke still drifted through the ruins. Burned-out tanks rested where they had last fired. The city was no longer a city in any recognizable sense. It was a graveyard stretching from the banks of the Volga to the shattered factories that had become symbols of defiance. The scale of destruction was almost impossible to comprehend. Stalingrad was nearly 90% destroyed. Entire districts had ceased to exist. Streets were buried beneath rubble and frozen bodies. Tens of thousands of corpses lay unburied, locked in ice. The stench of death would not fully fade for months. Survivors, both soldiers and civilians, emerged cautiously from cellars and bunkers, stepping into a landscape that looked more like the surface of the moon than a human settlement.
Casualty figures from the Battle of Stalingrad remain staggering. Combined losses from both sides are estimated at more than 2 million killed, wounded, or captured. The German Sixth Army alone suffered over 300,000 casualties, including those taken prisoner. Of the roughly 90,000 German soldiers captured at the end of the battle, fewer than 6,000 would ever return home. Many died from starvation, disease, or exposure during captivity. For those who survived, Stalingrad became a lifelong scar, both physical and psychological. For the Soviet Union, victory came at an almost unimaginable cost. Entire armies were destroyed and rebuilt. Countless families lost fathers, sons, and brothers. Civilians who survived the battle faced hunger, homelessness, and trauma in the ruins of their city. Yet despite the suffering, Stalingrad became a powerful symbol of resilience. Soviet propaganda portrayed it as proof that sacrifice could defeat even the most powerful enemy. The city itself would later be rebuilt, rising from the ashes as Volgograd, but its scars would never fully disappear. Strategically, Stalingrad marked a decisive turning point in World War II. It was the first complete destruction of a German field army and a blow from which the Wehrmacht would never truly recover. After Stalingrad, the German army remained on the defensive for the rest of the war on the Eastern Front. Initiative shifted decisively to the Red Army, which would push westward relentlessly until reaching Berlin. The psychological impact was just as significant as the military one. German allies began to doubt victory. Resistance movements across occupied Europe gained renewed hope. The battle also transformed the nature of modern warfare. Stalingrad demonstrated the devastating potential of urban combat on an industrial scale. It showed how cities could absorb and neutralize technological superiority, forcing armies into brutal close-quarters fighting. Lessons learned there would shape military doctrine for decades. Commanders studied Stalingrad not as a victory or defeat alone, but as a warning of what happens when ideology, pride, and obsession override strategic flexibility. Individual stories from the battle continued to surface long after the war ended. Veterans spoke of comrades whose names they never knew, of civilians who shared their last pieces of bread, of moments of humanity amid unimaginable cruelty. Many carried survivor's guilt for the rest of their lives. Others refused to speak of Stalingrad at all, unable to relive memories of hunger, cold, and constant death. For them, the battle never truly ended. Stalingrad also reshaped global perceptions of the war. It forced Allied leaders to recognize the scale of Soviet sacrifice and the central role of the Eastern Front. Without Stalingrad, the outcome of World War II would have been far less certain. The battle proved that Nazi Germany could be defeated through endurance, coordination, and overwhelming force, even in the face of catastrophic losses. Today, Stalingrad stands as a reminder of the extremes of human behavior. It reveals the capacity for cruelty, destruction, and suffering, but also for endurance, sacrifice, and determination. It was a battle where men fought not for ground, but for survival itself, where victory was measured in the ability to endure one more night, one more hour, one more step forward. The Battle of Stalingrad was not simply a clash of armies. It was a test of will between two systems, two leaders, and millions of individuals caught in between. Its legacy continues to shape how we understand war, power, and the cost of ambition. If you watched this documentary until the end, leave a comment with the word Stalingrad so we know you stayed with us through the entire story. Tell us what moment shocked you the most and what part of this battle left the strongest impression on you. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep watching the war documentaries appearing on your screen now. History is still unfolding, and the next story is waiting for you.